And with that, I'm actually going to get started. I want to be cognizant of time and give our panelists the most time to share their experiences and whatnot. So for those who don't know me, my name is Leanna Biddle. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Career Education Manager for the Warner College of Natural Resources. And so I appreciate and thank you all for being here in this space. I know that environmental consulting has been an industry that many of the students I'm working with and alum have an interest in. And so I'm excited for you all to hear from our different panelists, and I'm excited as well to hear from them and hear more about their experiences and how you can gain experience and put your best self forward as you think about a career in environmental consulting. So before that, I wanted to read the land acknowledgement to acknowledge the land that CSU is on. Colorado State University acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other Native tribes. We recognize the Indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. CSU was founded as a land grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion, and significantly that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose land this university was built upon. This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment. And if interested in learning more about our land acknowledgement, I did include a clickable link and we'll send you all this PowerPoint post-presentation. Again, for those who are entering our space, I'm going to include a link within the chat so you can put your name, CSU ID, and email as well. So before we dive in, I know many of you have navigated the virtual environment and different platforms, but I wanted to offer some different ways to best navigate this panel today that we have. So what you can do is use speaker view, which is in the top right. And with speaker view, you can focus on the panelists speaking. I also saw a new function, and I might be able to pin our panelists as well, so you only see those four on the main screen. So that will be my goal, is to have that available to you all. Feel free to use the raise hand function or chat box to ask a question. So if a question pops up, we have some prompted questions, but if a question comes to mind, feel free to use the chat, or following the 4 questions that we have initially for our panelists, you will be able to unmute yourself and ask a question as well. And so those are going to be the 2 options. And last but not least, please stay muted when not speaking, just so we don't hear any additional feedback. What I can do is, if there is some feedback, I can mute you as well, but preemptively, if you could mute yourself, that would be awesome. And last but not least, before we get to the good stuff, I did want to include for you all the initial questions that we have for our panelists. So they will introduce themselves and answer the following questions: how they entered into the field of environmental consulting, how students and alum can prepare themselves, the experience that may be needed for this industry, and lastly, what advice they have for students and alum interested in consulting as a whole. From there, we will just have our panelists introduce themselves and start us off. Greg, if you don't mind, I will stop sharing my screen. The first question, Greg, for you is, to begin, please introduce yourself and include your name, position, company, and a brief overview of your agency and specific role.
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Kane. I work for a larger company called Patel, and that's actually our consulting firm. The project I work on is the NEON program, and it's kind of it's a continental scale ecology project. We have something like 81 field sites scattered across the country. And, so my role is primarily as I maintain instrumentation sites. So we have a whole suite of eddy flux towers scattered across the country, and then aquatic-based instrumentation deployed to streams and lakes across the country. Did I miss anything in that question?
I don't think so. I think you're great. Any of the other panelists who would like to share, please feel free to do so.
So I'm Mark Matthews. I'm with Antea Group. So some of you I may have seen at the recruiting fairs over the period of time. I actually have been an environmental consultant for 32 years. So my experience exceeds most of your age, which I'm okay with the jokes about it. But Antea Group, as we go through, I'm the Western Region Manager. So what I like to tell people is I'm a scientist with an MBA. So I'm a scientist first. My MBA is actually from CSU. And so I've done, many different things throughout my career within the consulting industry, from being a field resource and building remediation systems all the way through today. My current assignment is I manage our Western region. And I also take care of all of our commercial technology. So any technology that is actively touching our clients, I have some interaction with, including innovation and and some of the other things that we do from that perspective. So I think that's everything. Brief overview. There you go. So thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
I can go next. This is my name is Phil Waz. I am a senior biologist for Ecorp Consulting. We are an environmental consulting firm in California. I've been at Ecorp for 10 years now, and Ecorp itself started in a garage in 1987, and now we've got 120 employees spread out over 4 offices in California. We've also got a small office in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Flagstaff, Arizona also has a small satellite office. Our 4 California offices, we've got a San Diego one, Orange County one. I'm out of our Redlands office, which is near San Bernardino. And then we have our corporate headquarters in Rockland, California. We're an environmental consulting firm. We provide our clients with ways to navigate through all California's crazy environmental laws. We do, a lot of biology, but then we're also doing CEQA, which is environmental planning, and NEPA, CEQA, environmental impact reports. We have a full service archaeology and cultural resources department, and then we also do restoration, open space management, water resources, watershed sciences. We have a GIS and mapping department as well that handles all of our mapping needs. We have multiple drone pilots that are running drones with LiDAR and using drones to do various surveys, like a bighorn sheep habitat assessment. And then we also do a little bit of landscape architecture and design stuff for mitigation areas and whatnot. I primarily do surveys for endangered species. I'm one of our small mammal biologists. I do a lot of trapping for listed and endangered small mammals. I do a lot of surveys in the Central Valley for kit foxes and other endangered species in the Central Valley. And then, we also do tons of surveys in the desert for a whole suite of desert species like desert tortoise and Mojave ground squirrel, and some listed and rare threatened plants. And yeah, that's kind of the rundown of what we do at Ecorp.
I think I'm next, right?
Yes, thanks, Julie.
My name is Julie Kapp. I'm senior wildlife biologist at Logan Simpson here in Fort Collins. We are a small woman-owned company that was started 30 years ago. Our headquarters is in Tempe, Arizona, and we have this office in Fort Collins, maybe 25 people, altogether maybe 120 people in our firm. We have different business lines, we call them. We have a design business line. They do a lot of landscape architecture, design parks and trails, and do visual resource analyses. We have a planning department that does a lot of community planning. all kinds of things, entire communities in Florida, Central City, just all sorts of really interesting projects for those folks. I'm in the environmental team, and we do a lot of NEPA. We do a lot of permitting, permit renewable energy projects with county permits or whatever else is necessary. We have an unusual kind of project that we work on, which is with BLM. They have all a requirement to do travel management planning. That is to say that they inventory, they go out on their field office and decide where they actually map where the routes are, who's using them, who do we want to use them, how do we want them to be used. And so we actually have a team of people that ride their motorcycles around BLM land all summer and collect GIS data, bring it back to the office and do evaluation. And then we write the documents, the NEPA documents to support those plans. That's an interesting kind of project. I do field work occasionally. Field work for us is kind of hit and miss, but I do a lot of, I specialize in migratory birds and all things bird related. And we have also a cultural team, full service cultural team that does archaeological investigations and reporting.
Perfect. Thank you, Julie. So the next question for you all is, how did you enter the field of environmental consulting? And whoever would like to go.
I can jump in there. So what's interesting is my science background is I actually have a degree in environmental studies with a minor in biology and a minor in geology. And when I entered into college, I wanted to work for the National Park Service. So I have visited most of the parks in the Western United States, and I never made it. You know, what I came to the realization very quickly was that I wasn't willing to work seasonal for the next 10 years before I could get a job. So I kind of fell into the environmental business. Actually, it was beginning back in that time, back in 1988, some new regulations from the EPA came abroad that really started to accelerate the environmental business at that time. And what was interesting is that my science knowledge really didn't get me a job. It was the fact that I grew up in a very blue collar family. I'm a pretty good electrician, plumber, you name it. And back in those days, when you were doing soil and groundwater remediation, you were literally building all of your equipment on site. So they needed somebody who was pretty handy, and I fit the bill there with the science background and a little bit of engineering knowledge. And that got me into the field. And what's interesting is those skills today are still what really applies for us often. You know, when you get into, especially in soil and groundwater remediation aspects of things, we lack a lot of people who have good hands-on experience anymore that can actually, you know, as we like to say, turn a wrench. And we do a lot of work up in Wyoming out of our Colorado office. So I've been working in the state of Wyoming for decades. And, you know, when the closest place that you can get a part is 50 miles, you got to be pretty handy. So, but that was literally, so I started in business as a fluke. And as I said, I've been there ever since, primarily doing remediation is my true expertise. So although I'm an environmental scientist, most people believe I'm an engineer by education, by what I do. So, all right, I'll pass.
I can jump in. I graduated from CSU in May of 2009. I took a job out of school as a team member of a small mammal trapping team working for the USGS outside of Las Vegas. We were doing, you know, prior to that, I had some other small mammal experience and some birding experience that I gained during the summers while I was attending school. That would be something that we touch on later in some of my recommendations, is gaining some experience while you're still in school. But you know, when I was once I graduated, I had a little bit of small mammal trapping experience and got hired onto this small mammal trapping crew. We were trapping Palmer's chipmunk. They live on up on Mount Charleston outside of Las Vegas in Nevada, and it's the only place they occur in the world. They're on a I think they call it a sky island out there. They can't go down because it's too hot, and they definitely can't go up. So we were monitoring their population for the summer, and that was just supposed to be a seasonal position. I was just doing it to get some experience. But the job was wrapping up in August, and they asked if anybody wanted to go out to Orange County, California, and trap bobcats and coyotes. And I was like, yeah, please, that sounds fun. And I don't need to apply for another job quite yet. So yeah, I'll go out to Orange County, California. Knowing nothing about California, I drove out there, and they put me up in a Motel 6 for a month. It was only supposed to be a month-long gig. Month ended up turning into 9 months. Luckily, I didn't stay at the Motel 6 for 9 months. I was able to get an apartment shortly after that first month. And, you know, we were working on a really cool study. They had collared a bunch of bobcats and coyotes on this one freeway interchange. The California Department of Transportation had put in some wildlife underpasses. And so they were trying to see if the carnivores in the area were using those underpasses. So we were trapping animals, putting collars on them, taking collars off of them if the collar didn't fall off properly. And then we were reviewing a lot of camera data as well, which was pretty cool. Following that, I took a job out in the Carrizo Plain National Monument, which is in the Central Valley of California. I was the crew leader for a small mammal trapping team out there. We were also doing a whole food web study related to grazing and ungrazed areas. So we were doing surveys for kit fox, spotlight surveys at night. We were doing pitfall trapping for invertebrates and bird point counts and vegetation transects and leopard lizard surveys. And then the main focus of it was giant kangaroo rat trapping and San Joaquin antelope squirrel trapping. Prior to taking that position, which was also another seasonal position, I had applied for my job at Ecorp Consulting. Never heard anything back from them, or actually, I think I might have gotten an email back saying, we don't have any positions at the moment, but we'll keep your resume on file, which is usually short for, we're not going to call you again. You know, luckily, right as this job on the Carrizo Plain was ending, I got a call from a lady at Ecorp Consulting, and she said she had my resume, so I guess they did keep it on file. And she wanted to talk to me and bring me in for an interview. That was in September of 2010, and I've been here ever since. Coincidentally met my wife. She also works at Ecorp as well, and we work a lot together. Yeah, I've just been out in California. Kind of wasn't particularly looking for a job in the environmental consulting field, but I was looking for a full-time permanent job where I could put down some roots and have some benefits and things like that. I was kind of tired of living out of my car for the last year or so since I graduated college. So it was either this job, which I happened to get, or I was thinking of going back and getting a master's degree, but ended up in consulting. And even though it wasn't something I was looking for, it ended up being something I really enjoyed. There's a lot of survey and science work to it, but then there's also a business aspect of it that I really liked. I've always had a kind of a business mind, and so project management and dealing with clients and proposing on work and winning work is an aspect of consulting that I also really enjoy, other than just being outside and doing surveys and the fun stuff. But that's kind of my story and how I fell into environmental consulting.
Well, I can go next. Yeah, wow, those are two really good stories. Tough to follow. Yeah, so I would say, yeah, how I got it started into this is kind of a series of discovering what I didn't want to do throughout history. I graduated from the University of North Dakota with undergrad in fisheries and wildlife biology, minor in geology. Love the fieldwork aspect of it. Kind of had aspirations to, work for the feds. Never really panned out. Wound up right out of undergrad doing bird survey work a lot. Songbird survey work. So that's, get up at 4 a.m., get to the site, and, you're done by noon. But, how do you, socialize with other people on those jobs? That's kind of tough. So I decided that wasn't for me. So I went back to grad school, got my master's in oddly forensic DNA and Bayesian machine-based learning. So a lot of weird things in there. Worked in a forensics lab where we were processing Neanderthal DNA and other like ancient museum specimens. Had high aspirations. I was going to get a PhD, and about 2 years into it, I decided once again, yeah, no, PhD is not the route for me. So I took the first exit and stuck with the master's. I then kind of, bounced around a bit, worked jobs working with snapping turtles, kind of getting, like Mark said, that plumbing experience, and, somehow I found myself, you know, in the applicant pool that wasn't very deep because it was this odd job that no one had really kind of figured out what exactly these people do yet. But they knew I worked with lab instrumentation, DNA sequencers and stuff, and they were like, well, so you can do that. What do you think about doing that 150 feet in the air? And I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. Why not? And now, like, I install and maintain infrared gas analyzers way up there in the trees. The job's been pretty cool. It's not at all what I set out to do. I've traveled all over the country doing it. They constantly ship me up to Barrow, Alaska, down to Hawaii. I actually just moved from our Tucson office over to our Virginia office, almost in DC right now. But it's been a crazy wild ride, and it wasn't at all what I thought I would be doing with my life when I was sitting in your position now.
Well, I will echo what my panelists have said. It was a long and winding road for me to get started in consulting. I graduated in 1981 from CSU with a degree in wildlife biology. And at the time, there was a full-blown recession going on, and there was no such thing as the internet or laptops or cell phones or any of the things that you guys have at your disposal. So did whatever job I could find until finally had my children. And I worked at an elementary school as a teacher's aide, a literacy paraprofessional for the 12 years that my children were in school. And at the end of that time, a parent of one of their friends said, "Hey, Julie, I know you had a degree, you've always had an interest in getting back into or getting a start in wildlife biology. And I work for a big environmental consulting firm here in town, and we're hiring. Why don't you come over?" And I brought my resume over there as fast as I could. And my resume said, literacy paraprofessional. That's what was on it. And they said, "Thank you, but we'll maybe talk to you again another time." And a year later, "Boy, you got to come over here again. We've got a huge project." And okay, back I come with my resume. And I sat in the interview with 4 people from the company, and they're asking me questions and trying as hard as they could to throw me a bone in the interview. And finally I said, "I just don't know how to tell you that there's no way I can sugarcoat this. I don't have any experience, but if you hire me, I'll be the hardest worker on your staff. And there's nothing that I won't, try my hardest to learn and to do." And they gave me a shot. And it was a huge environmental consulting firm. And they had a huge project with they called it at the time, a practically unlimited budget where they could allow me to train and learn and grow. And I spent almost 10 years with that firm, and I've been with Logan Simpson now another 3 years. Once again, you walk in the door and they first say, we're a small firm, everybody wears a lot of hats. So get ready to say, I'll do my best and give it a try. And that's one thing I've always liked about environmental consulting is the variety in the job, and all the people that have been so wonderful and always willing to mentor you or answer questions. And my technology, when I finally got this job, was so woefully out of date. Well, technology probably didn't exist before that. My children call me Amish. So I would say in comparison to you guys, I'm completely at a deficit there. But I love, I love my job. We have interesting projects, and I work, I guess, I'll throw in the lifestyle. I work in an office. I sit in front of a computer most of my time. Sometimes I get out in the field and look for birds or eagle nests or whatever, but it's a pretty stable lifestyle. I have benefits. I have a full-time job. That's I raise my family. The people I work with have families. I don't have to move around. I think that sums it up for me.
Awesome. Thank you all. So I want to give some context to the next question, which focuses on how students can prepare themselves for a career with your company or in consulting. Oftentimes when I'm meeting with students as a career educator, I always get the kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the anxiety of looking at environmental consulting type positions and seeing the 5+ years of experience or all of the experience needed. And so the question for you all is, help us understand how students can prepare themselves for a career with your company or the field. Is there experience students should gain or skills they can develop to make themselves stand out as an applicant with your organization and or consulting companies in general? And I know that's a long question. It is in the chat, so you can always pull it up and take a look at it as well. But yeah, any thoughts that you have on that?
So I'll jump in there. And when you're looking at preparing yourself for consultancies, so I'm going to say one thing that really follows in with Julie is I'm going to tell you, go to your resume rush, and I'll tag Matt for this one, and learn how to write a resume. Because I can't tell you the first thing you want to turn off an environmental consultant is get a resume from a chemical engineer that says, I want to become a process engineer. It's like, well, that's nice. We don't do process engineering. And there it goes, So every resume should be tailored to who you are applying to, Antea Group is a small US company. We're 400 people in the US, but we're 3,000 internationally. Know who you're applying to, look at what you're going to do. The going to Battelle is very different than a small organization, so you've got to understand your audience very well and take the time to get knowledgeable about who you're applying to. I literally once had a student from CSU that we tried to hire. He ended up in Washington, DC with another firm eventually, but he had an internship with us that literally was an environmental economist. So that was his educational path. He had another degree in business. And he was asking me about our international organization and how literally the stock was sold internationally and if you could purchase in the US and everything else. I mean, he was getting into in-depth corporate structure, and the only way I could have answered it was because of my position, But he knew that much about our company. There was just no question after we talked to him for 10 minutes, it's like, hire that kid, So that was that's one thing. And then, all of us as panelists have said we didn't really know what we wanted to do when we started. And no one expects you to walk in the door with a bunch of experience. We're looking for problem solvers. We're looking for people who can communicate well. I mean, it's the standard list of check, 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 when you go through the list. But I think things that you can do is, if you can understand where you want to go with some determination, if you want to become a field geologist, having advanced GIS skills are obviously going to be, to your benefit. So think about what you truly want to try to do, and try to, lead toward that aspect of it. The other thing, as you get through this and you look at the organizations and the companies, every one of us will tell you technical writing. If you haven't taken technical writing, take technical writing. The fastest way to not get promoted in an environmental consultancy is to not be able to write. So, I mean, that's just a, key right there. If you're not good at it, get better at it. The computer will do the math for you. I mean, I hate to tell you, but you will never use Calc 4 again in your life, so it's move on. And then I think the other thing too, as you go in, is really define what you're willing to do. And there's a lot of travel in this team of the panelists here. A lot of people are in the field, a lot of people are willing to relocate. I've, people who have relocated for 6 months, for 6 years, wherever it might be. Understand what you want to do when you get into that organization. Because if you're wasting your time, especially if you're telling a company, hey, I'll relocate anywhere, and then when it comes down to it and they're saying, well, that's great, I got a job in New York and one in LA, and you're going, well, I really wanted to stay in the mountains. Yeah, well, LA is kind of close, but so really understand that and be honest with yourself about those pieces. And yeah, and then the field opportunities that you have at the university, if you're a geologist, I mean, there's some good drilling classes, things like that I know, depending on what you're doing, is take advantage of those field opportunities, either through internships or direct coursework, so that you can actually say, yes, I know what an auger rig looks like when I'm sitting in that interview. That'll get you a long way, surprisingly. It'll give you something to talk about with the people, if nothing else. So, all right, I'll pass on that one.
I can go next again. Yeah, to echo a lot of Mark's sentiments, being flexible, don't limit yourself to the Front Range of Colorado, or your hometown or something like that. If you really want to, get the job of your dreams type of thing, you got to be willing to put yourself out there. You got to be willing to travel. As some of us did, we worked a couple, seasonal positions or term positions to gain some experience and build that resume before we were able to get that entry-level position at a consulting firm. Once you do get that entry-level position at a consulting firm, if you're not coming in with a lot of experience, don't expect, a high pay. We have a lot of people coming out of college these days, and I don't know if the professors are just telling kids that they should ask for 30 an hour or what, but that's just not what people straight out of school in the environmental consulting firm with no experience get. So, somewhere in the $20-$25 an hour range, is a really decent starting salary, at least at our company. And as a entry-level employee, you're going to work a lot of overtime too. So, that $20 an hour, it looks a lot better when you're working 60, 65 hours in the week, which brings me to being flexible. Right now in my career, 10 years in, I'm still traveling a lot. I have a project up in Northern California right now that I have 5 weeks worth of work between now and the end of, or it started in the beginning of March, but between March and June, I'm going to be going up there for a week at a time for 5 different weeks. A little snapshot of what some of our staff are doing right now. We've got people up in the Sierra Nevadas doing a survey for tortoises. We've got people out of Long Beach doing on a boat, doing marine mammal monitoring for a pier installation project on a Navy base. We've got people down by the Arizona border doing a habitat assessment for listed small mammal species. And none of these places are very close to our office. So people are doing overnights. You got to be willing to spend a little bit of time in the hotel. All of this obviously, is paid for, and your expenses and whatnot per diem's all covered. But right out of college, maybe not the right time to get a dog. We have a lot of people that are like, oh, interviewing for this job, and they seem like a great candidate, but like, oh, I can't travel because I got a dog. And it's like, well, like, sorry, kind of part of the gig, at least as an entry level person. Be willing to work those long hours, be willing to say yes to just about anything. Do the quote unquote grunt work, is a really great way to, just show your boss that you're in it and you're committed and you're willing to do what it takes. And that really, it really reflects well on you as an employee. In my line of work, doing a lot of surveys and stuff, there's a lot of hiking. So, being in shape and being able to carry a backpack, not a heavy backpack, but, carrying your water and stuff like that, all day, that's important. Skills that, I would recommend developing would be bird and plant ID skills. You can take classes or workshops, sometimes through the Wildlife Society. I'll touch on the Wildlife Society in a little bit as well. And as Mark said, writing skills are super important. We all have illustrious, dreams of being out in the field and handling animals and doing surveys and great stuff like that. But as you move up and as you start to make more money and, take on more responsibility, there's a lot of writing involved in the consulting field. Every survey that I do, there has to be a report written about it afterwards and sent to the client. We write a lot of large documents for, we're writing the biological sections of environmental impact statements and environmental impact reports. I'm constantly writing proposals for new work. We do a lot of, we're pumping out tons of contracts and proposals every single day because our firm being small, we love the big projects, but we also thrive on the small projects, little $3,000 to $5,000 jobs. Those are sort of our bread and butter. We like the $1 million, $5 million jobs as well, but we have a lot of clients that come to us for small stuff and they need it fast. And so you got to get it to them fast in order to be accommodating. But, busy time right now, April, spring, March, April, May, June's probably our 4 busiest months. Those are the months where you'll expect to be out in the field a lot, away from home, possibly. But, back to those writing skills, we have so many staff in the field right now, and our biology department manager is so overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed right now that we're passing down proposals to some of our entry-level staff that have never written a proposal before or never written a report before. They've just been out in the field, but we don't have anybody else to write the report. So it's like, hey, can you write? All right, here you go. And some of those staff who came in with a little bit of writing experience, either through some continued education or some technical writing classes, they've been able to really pick up that stuff pretty fast. And, if you show your boss that you can do one thing well, you're going to get another thing coming down the pipe pretty soon. And so, those people, are really progressing and moving up the ladder, so to speak, in part due to their writing skills. They're also great biologists as well, but the writing is an important aspect of it. But yeah, I guess, the general theme of my advice would be just being willing to be flexible, being willing to travel, saying yes to anything, and, getting experience prior to applying is great, but even while you're working at, if you do get hired by a firm, try and get experience in all the different things that they do within that firm as well. We've got people that specialize in plants, people that specialize in small mammals, people that specialize in aquatic resources and permitting and things like that. And then we've got all the environmental planning and, you know, try and, you know, while you're there, get a little bit of experience with all those different departments, and it'll give you a little bit more staying power at your organization as well. And then, you know, going into an interview, definitely, you know, research the company, look at their website, try and find some, you know, keywords, if you will. You know, when a young student fresh out of school comes in and in an interview and they mention the term CEQA, you know, California Environmental Qualities Act, that's California, basically California's environmental law. And it's something that really guides what we do on a daily basis. And so they come in and they drop the term CEQA. It shows to me that they've thought about it or looked at our website, or they know a little bit about what we do, things like that. So that's always good, you know, to just kind of show people that you've done your background research, if you will. But yeah, I think that's it for me for now.
All right. Yeah, I guess I'm next. Yeah, wow. You guys hit a lot of things right there, and yeah, I agree with a lot of them. I mean, I think my goal has always been to, you know, work on the East Coast, and it's taken me like 17 years to actually get to where I want to be. Long road. Like I spent 15 years in the frigid north of North Dakota, and then 3 years in the kitchen in Arizona. But yeah, I mean, that willingness to travel, relocate. I mean, 7 years, even at my current job, I still have a go bag packed. Like they call me and I get on the plane and go. You know, definitely communication. Yeah, communication, just being able to talk to people, I think is a great skill. You know, once you get to that interview, you have to be able to talk to people. Even if, you know, sometimes if you're not that great at writing and you're still working on your writing skills, if you can really wow somebody at your interview by just being able to talk to them, that's a great thing. You know, I think going forward, you know, the field is going to see probably a lot more technology deployed in it. And this is something, you know, I think younger people are going to have a lot more advantage going into it. You know, personally, you know, myself, I've even been taking community college classes just to catch up on like a lot of the freeware, and like I do a lot of work with Linux servers, and just being able to run command line interfaces just for basic things. I mean, they're not, a lot of people probably aren't expecting you to write code, but they probably might be able to, you know, expect you to, you know, run a couple scripts or something, or just have that foundational knowledge, you know, just to kind of, you know, give you that leg up. That's all I got.
So I would echo everything that everybody has said, especially, and I just have to reemphasize, you must be a good writer or you will not be a good consultant, and you will not be happy. You'll be frustrated because you may go out and count deer pellets or trap salamanders or you know, do whatever you want to do. The deliverable to the people that are paying your company for your services is a report or an environmental impact statement or a travel management plan or whatever. It is a written document. That's what your deliverable is. And the quality and the efficiency that you produce that's how your company decides whether you're a good employee. I want to have Julie on my project. I want to have Julie be the technical editor for that document. And there's no way to overemphasize getting comfortable and practicing your technical writing skills. Also technology and you know, Greg was over the top there, but but I will say that I'm at a significant disadvantage by not having any kind of a comfort level with a handheld GPS to walk around in the field, know where I am, be able to find that nest again. And especially if you want to interview with Logan Simpson, being able to nobody expects you to be a master of anything. But if you've had enough GIS to where you could pull together a map and say, here, this is where I was, or this is the map I think you're looking for in your document. If you could at least do that, you're going to have an extra, tool in your backpack that's going to set you apart and get you the job or get you the next opportunity. So I would stress those things. So I wanted to try to think of something different that hasn't already been said. And I'll throw this out. Logan Simpson does a lot of public meetings lately, virtual public meetings in Timbuktu, where the BLM is preparing a controversial travel management plan to tell four-wheel activists where they can and can't go and why, and to gather public input. And you have to document and respond to all these hundreds and hundreds of public comments. Go to a public meeting, go to some, see how people facilitate those meetings. How do we gather their comments? We set up a GIS station and our specialist sits there and lets the farmer, oh, where is my, can you show me my property on that map in relation to the transmission line that you're proposing, or whatever it is. And then we have the ability to capture their comment. We have the legal responsibility to acknowledge that we got their comment. How do we respond to it? And they get to go home with a printed map showing them, oh, wow, look, here I am in the world. This is why I'm important. This is my property. So the different tools and platforms that people use for these public meetings and dialogue is changing daily. And our specialists at our firm, they can hardly keep up with the different aspects of and the potential. I can record this meeting. I can, it's unlimited. But that's a huge, that would be a huge tool that you could bring to our interview and have some familiarity to be able to discuss a public meeting, what that looks like, how does Larimer County gather public input for their new comprehensive plan, or the city of Fort Collins, or whatever. And Leanna, before I get off, I'm just going to assume that we are not talking about cultural resources, although that is considered an environmental environmental arm of probably most of our firms here that we represent, and environmental consulting firms certainly as a whole. So that might be a subject for a different day. I can't really speak to it. I can just say we have a huge cultural resource team, and they're always busy. And they not only go in the field, you can be the best, you can be the best archaeologist in the game, but if you can't deliver your reports on time and well written, you've left a bad taste.
Thank you, everyone. So I had one more question prepared, but with timing, I actually wanted to open it up to see if any students or alum had any questions that they wanted to ask via the chat. So feel free to include your questions there, or if you use the raise hand function, you can unmute yourself and ask a question as well. I think hopefully I want to be cognizant of time and our panelists being here. So maybe one question and we'll see how that goes time-wise.
I could ask one.
Perfect, please.
All right, so I'm going to actually mainly direct this to Mr. Mathiewicz. And I myself, and I see quite a few names in the list here too, are geology majors here at Colorado State. And I know that you as well as Mr. Kane have both gotten a minor in geology. And I was just wondering, what kind of skills does a geologist bring to the table in environmental remediation, particularly groundwater like you do? And what skills might somebody with my degree be lacking? And what are some ways that we could compensate for those?
You know, so from a geologist standpoint, CSU's got a pretty good program. There is an ability to do, you know, most geology in the environmental field is generally, I'm going to say generally, because occasionally you get to drill a 1,000-foot well, but it's not very damned often. It's, you know, most things are 50 feet and less. So what a geologist can really do is from a perspective of get in there, go to field camp, but if you can get to sit a rig anywhere, whether maybe it's an internship doing geotech work for a summer or something like that, so you can learn to log a hole. So the thing that surprises most people when you hire a geologist is like, you look at some of the logs you get and it's like, shit, you can't tell the difference between sand, silt, or clay, you know? So, I mean, you're kind of wondering what's going on for where they came through. So some of those technical skills and just being able to go to field camp, if it's an option or not an option, take it. Always take the harder road. I will say that. So get to field camps regardless of your discipline. But some of those groundwater courses, just understanding, you know, simple hydrology, you know, if you've ever done a pump test, if you have those types of skills, those are things that you really want to have on your resume. Because in the environmental consulting business, especially in the private sector, unless you're going into mining and oil and gas, I mean, we're not doing, you know, large geomorph type mapping, you know, we're not mapping formations, we're mapping shallow logs, you know. So so it's those skills, if you really want to be in the private side, that you have to think about. You're not going to get to map a 500-acre fault, you know, it's not going to happen anymore. So those are academia, and you know, that's a thing that you really have to identify too of what you want to do. And I think that's a good piece when you look at this as a geologist, especially, is do you want to work on big projects? Do you want to work, you know, for the USGS? Do you want to work on small projects? Are you good with constant travel? Those are things where I think you have to be really honest with yourself about who you are and what you're willing to put up with, or what you want to do truly. Because, you know, if you're somebody who really does really well in small settings, you know, you don't want to work for AECOM because you're going to be on the same project for the next 10 years, you know, on a federal site. I mean, so really try to identify what you want to do, especially as a geologist. You want to do big projects where you get to see things through for a long time, or do you want to, you know, work on simple transaction investigations where you're just looking for contamination and moving on to the next place? So that's what I would say there.
Thank you. That was very informative.
Thanks, Daniel. Any other questions? If it's okay with our panelists, maybe room for one more question, and then we can wrap it up.
I did have a question real quick. So you guys touched on like being able to know technical writing and being able to do proposals, and knowing some technical, like having that advantage would set you apart on a resume. Would you say also like having some environmental law experience, or at least knowing something with policy, like what would help? Like, I mean, the group of us here sounds like we're all interested in being consultants. Like, what would help us be a step above like anybody else out there? What would you recommend?
So I guess I'll jump in real quick. So from an environmental law policy piece, again, that's really trying to identify what type of consultancy do you want to work for? Because, you know, when you get to environmental law, I mean, each one of us has a very different perspective of what comes up there. You know, whether you're going after water law, Bechtel probably has a whole group that does water law, you know, and our water resource group is more towards the sustainability piece of things, you know. So I have a thing that I've had carried this around for literally decades. You can't read it, okay, but it says environmental problems are emotional, environmental solutions are technical, and environmental decisions are political. Okay, and this is called the environmental rules, and I've literally kept this with me for a long time. But to be a really good consultant, you have to understand all three. You can't lead with emotions, you know. So when you're looking into policy, we're scientists, for God's sakes, you know. Emotions have no room for what we do, you know. So I think you have to really look at this. You get into the political side on the policy aspect of things, and that's a very different realm than some of us are elsewhere. So I think that's where you really got to identify what kind of firm do you want to go to, and do some serious research about what's going on there. And you can move around a little bit, but once you choose a path, it's after about 10 years, it's hard to switch.
I would be impressed if somebody came in and, you know, we're in California. So if you were coming out from Fort Collins and you were applying for a job in California, I'm a wildlife biology major. So I'm going to talk from like a wildlife standpoint and what I do. But, you know, if you were interested in being a, you know, assistant biologist is what our entry level position is called. And if you came in and you did a little bit of background research on, okay, I'm applying for a job in Redlands, California. What type of endangered species might be around that area? And you did a little research, you find out pretty quickly that there's tortoise and there's Mojave ground squirrel. And then we also have some riparian bird species like southwestern willow flycatcher and California gnatcatcher. You know, then you could look up those species and find out what are the survey protocols for those species? You know, how do we go out and identify those species? And if you had a little bit of familiarity with those survey protocols and you came into an interview and you were like, oh yeah, so the survey protocol season for tortoise starts April 1st, right? You know, I'd be like, whoa, you know, that's pretty cool. Like she did a little bit of research and that would be impressive to me. So that's a little tidbit. I know we're running short on time. There's two other things that I wanted to, you know, get out there before we hung up. One was if you're into wildlife and you want to be a biologist and you're not already involved with the Wildlife Society at CSU, go get involved with the Wildlife Society. It's one of my biggest regrets as a wildlife biology major at CSU was not getting more involved with the Wildlife Society. Since doing so, I've been to a few conferences and workshops. It's just a great organization for wildlife biologists. Second, when you send somebody your resume, they might reply back, thanks, yada, yada, yada. They might not reply back. Follow up with them. The people that follow up with me are the people that get the first interview. And they might not even have the best resume, but they're the squeaky wheel. And they're like, hey, Mr. Waz, have you had a chance to look at that resume? And I'm like, oh, crap, I'm so busy. But why don't you just come in for an interview? You've emailed me twice now. So you know, follow up with people and be persistent. That'll get you places. So those are my two things.
And I would second that. I didn't get involved with the Wildlife Society until later on. And actually, with my experience, my first 10 years of experience in the field, I applied for their certified wildlife biologist designation. And I had that's on my title, and you can get that. You can get an associate from that organization. So that's an easy do. I wanted to throw out to your question about environmental law. If we step it down just a little, the kinds of documents that we all prepare, environmental impact statements and all that, we certainly don't set policy, but we're expected to understand it. We're expected to know what's in place to protect endangered species or state listed species or the whole flavor Migratory Bird Treaty Act. We're expected to know what those policies are, what they mean to our clients and to the documents that we produce. You might be interested if you Google environmental conservation measures, just Google that term and find out all the different things that agencies can require or recommend, or I can decide I'm going to put in that document. If you're going to build that transmission line up here north of town, you're going to first, if you build it during migratory bird nesting season, then I need to be up there, or someone needs to be up there within 7 days looking for ground nesting birds. And then we learn how to protect them. And I kind of say, hey, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, I think 100-foot radius buffer around that nest on the ground would be appropriate. And I will come up and monitor that nest. So just understand that you do, even as an environmental consultant, you do employ these kinds of policies and regulations, and it is fulfilling to hold people to it, so to speak. I think that I don't, environmental consultants can get the reputation of of holding up progress or development or whatever, those projects are going to get built with or without us. They are. But we can make sure they get built with some protection measures employed and enforced, and different sites chosen or avoided during, that's what I spend my days doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. At least for me, from a wildlife biology standpoint in environmental consulting, sometimes it's tough. And I'll describe that a little bit more. I wouldn't get into environmental consulting if you wanted to save the world or save every animal that's out there. Don't get me wrong. I love these animals, and they get me super jazzed up. And when I discover something new, or I really love the science of it all. But our job is to help our clients get to their end goal, which is building that Walmart over the top of that wetland or something like that. And it's crappy, but if we like Julie said, if we don't help them do it, someone else is. But we can make sure that Walmart or whatever, or that highway is built according to the laws, and in the most environmentally sound way possible, while avoiding major significant, we call them significant impacts in the environmental planning world. But sometimes the lesser species, like your common mouse, or a vole or a rabbit or something like that, that's not rare or endangered or protected, we do a lot of construction monitoring. So when they're building that Walmart or whatever, we're there to make sure that they're not cutting down a tree that has a bald eagle nest in it. But the mouse that's in a burrow and there's a bulldozer, there's not much that we can do about that. There's no protection for them, and I can't go across the site catching every little critter that pops out of the ground. So there is a kind of macabre side to environmental consulting, but in the end, we're helping these clients. The progress is going to happen, things are going to get built, infrastructure is going to go in place, but we're helping them navigate the environmental laws, and also helping them to build whatever they need to build, but in an environmentally good way, according to the laws that have been provided by the state and the federal government. So
Awesome. Thank you all so much. That was super helpful. Appreciate it.
good question.
Thank you.
I would like to thank our panelists for being here and offering such amazing information. So please react, whether it be a reaction that you can click or unmuting and clapping your hands. I'm just so appreciative. We're so appreciative that you were able to join us tonight and answer some of these questions. And if you all don't mind, panelists, if you are willing and able to share your email in the chat, you may have some questions coming your way. I know students were messaging me asking, can I email them after the fact and maybe make a connection and ask a couple more questions? So again, if you're comfortable, feel free to include your email in the chat. But yeah, just a big thank you for sharing this space with us tonight.
Yeah.
One little shout out, we are totally hiring right now. If anybody wants to come out to California after you graduate in May, look up www.com, ecorconsulting.com, ECORP consulting. I'll drop that in the chat as well. But we're hiring a whole bunch of different positions, everything from entry-level biologist positions to environmental planners, archaeologists, water resources, you name it. So there's a careers section on the website. Go check that out.
Yeah, that's the same for all of us. I think it's or at least right now it's springtime, so the university is being recruited and everybody's looking. So primarily, you can either go east or west for us. We don't have a lot in the Rocky Mountains right now, but we always have stuff in Detroit and on the East Coast. And I'm always looking for people somewhere on the West Coast. In fact, many of your fellow students are somewhere around the country, I'm sure, with all of us. So.
That's awesome. Oh, go ahead, Greg, please.
Yeah, I mean, in the NEON program, we've got, I think they're starting a new wave of hiring here I think a lot of positions are going to start June 1st. So that's like perfect time. People coming right out of school. You know, I think we've got 18 offices across the country. They're looking, I think, like 6 people each. They're looking to hire, and I know they just posted. I want to say 5 or 6 new like full-time positions with benefits. So, you know, throw your name in the hat. Why not?
That's awesome. Thank you. And to our attendees, if you haven't done so, please include your information in the attendance sheet. I plan to send a follow-up email with any additional documents. I have my 2 wonderful career ambassadors here, and one is taking notes. And so we have those notes available to you following this as well. But again, thank you to our panelists. I will hang out for a second if anyone has any additional questions. But again, thank you for being here. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. And if anybody wants to hook up on LinkedIn, feel free to send me an invite, and that will actually get you to my network, which includes friends at ERM and other consultancies also. So we're, obviously not the only ones. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.